We're going to look at training for child abuse, and this will include the new mandated reporter child care professional training that was just released this year. Some of the things we'll look at is the role of the director and the program in child abuse prevention and being a mandated reporter. Then how do you train your staff on child abuse plus being a mandated reporter? And then also, I'm recording this the day before it goes live, before Thanksgiving, because I just had a chance 2 weeks ago to sit down and do the new online mandated reporter child care professional training. It was just released by the state. There's a new law that in 2018 will all be online mandated reporter trained. And for most of the year, the site was down, and they said that we needed to come back and look and all of these things. So I've been looking at this website for months, hoping that within a few months they would open up this new training so that we could all fulfill this training that's mandated by law. So I'm going to go more into that. So why is there a new mandated reporter training? Why is it important for staff and for teachers to know it? Why should programs and directors take it so seriously? Because every year, at least 3 million cases of child abuse are reported to authorities. And unfortunately, that means that many more cases are not reported. And the children that we work with, children under the age of 4 for some of our programs, and then those with developmental disabilities as well, are at the highest risk of physical abuse. So they are the most vulnerable to it. And so us as teachers, as programs, as directors and administrators, we have a legal requirement, first of all, to report any child abuse. And then it's really our ethical imperative to train our teachers so that they can help us report suspected abuse. Because we want to make sure that any child that might be in an abuse situation has been reported to social services so that they can step in and they can help the child get the care that they need. Okay, so what's the role of the director? Right now, at the end of 2017, it's really important that you guys go to this childcare.mandatedreporterca.com. You take the training yourself, you familiarize yourself with the 3 hours of training that you need to do, because it's called Mandated Reporter Child Care Professionals, and it's the new law that all child care professionals complete this by March 30th, 2018. And then after that, any new hires get it within 90 days of employment, and then after that, all child care professionals complete it every 2 years. So that's our new law. Brand new. The mandated reporter child care professional training just came out in October. I just took it 2 weeks ago, and that's kind of why I'm telling you about it. So we're going to go more into detail about the parts of it, how long it takes, how you might go about training people within your program. But this is the big thing that you guys need to be working on before March 2018. Also within our program, hiring practices, policy, and training are really important in order to protect children in your program, and then also protect your program from accusations of child abuse by parents or in the community. So the biggest thing is background checks. Anybody who lives in the home or anybody who works at your child care center has gone through a thorough background check, and you have proof of this. And then contacting references, doing your due diligence to make sure that any past employment, they were appropriate with children and families, and they know about discipline and developmentally appropriate care. A code of conduct, either NIAC's ethical code of conduct or another one that you've written yourself that specifies what's appropriate and what's inappropriate for teachers and their behavior within the classroom and with their coworkers. And then for parents, so when we talked about working with families, what we expect from parents in the classroom. Can you come into my classroom and throw F-bombs around or spank your kid in my parking lot? You know, what do I expect from you as a parent, and what do I expect from you as a teacher? And this also includes my discipline policy. For teachers, what do I think are challenging behaviors, and how can they be handled with positive behavioral techniques? And then another one is an open line of communication. So all of my staff, all of my teachers know if you see something in the classroom, either suspected abuse outside of our program, that you let me know, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then also open line of communication. If you see a coworker, staff member, or a teacher engaging in any kind of inappropriate behaviors with their coworkers or the children in their care, that you need to let me know right away. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to help you, and I'm going to make sure that these children have positive behavioral techniques being implemented into the classroom. So you need to let me know if somebody's being inappropriate or doesn't know about positive discipline, so that I can either train them or I can take steps to make sure that they do know how to implement this within the classroom, because that's part of it, is keeping children safe in our classroom by having a discipline policy which is implemented. And you as a teacher need to let me know this. So I always had an open line of communication. Call me, text me, come see me in my office. I'm walking down the hallway, flag me down. I'm about to go to lunch, jump in my car and go with me to McDonald's. Whatever it is, you need to let me know about it so that I can take care of it. The role of the teacher is, first of all, to be my boots on the ground. So you identify child abuse and you know what child abuse is, and you know when you have a suspicion what the chain of command is. And this includes to identify and report to your director, or identify and report on your own. So I'm going to give you some kind of case studies of things that have happened to me over the years so that you can kind of see how this plays out for teachers. So one time I had a bunch of preschool teachers, and they called me down to the classroom. Hey, so-and-so had a really interesting weekend. Could you talk to him about it? It's Monday morning, I sit down, I serve myself some food, I sit next to him at the breakfast table, I tell the teachers, start washing hands and head out to the playground early this morning, because I just want a little bit of a smaller environment in order to kind of chat with this child. So I'm talking to the kids and we're laughing and we're talking about whatever movie had just come out. I think it was like Thor or something like that. Chatting, yeah, oh, so funny, la 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 la. Most of the kids have left. It's just me and a couple other kids in this classroom. And I say, hey, so-and-so, tell me about your weekend. What happened? And he's like, yeah, and he tells me about Saturday. And then he gets to Sunday morning, and I'm like, oh, what happened on Sunday? And he's like, yeah, we're playing Monopoly, and I flipped the board, and I stepped on my sister's hand, and I pulled my other sister's hair, and I kicked my brother, and he kind of goes through this rampage of this Monopoly game that sounds like it went really poorly. And he said, at the end, my dad took me and he spanked me on the butt. And I was like, okay. I'm like, awesome. Well, that sounds like quite a morning you had. I'm like, what happened after that? And he was like, he told me I needed to knock it off and I needed to start being nice to people. And I said, okay. And then what happened after that? He's like, well, later on we went to Olive Garden and we had lunch and then we blah, 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 blah. So I said, okay, yeah, it sounds like you had kind of a rough morning. Why don't you go outside and play? And then I took the teachers to the side and I kind of told them what he told me. And I said, it does sound like the parents use corporal punishment. And they did spank this child once on his bottom after having kind of a rough morning. And they're like, yeah, that sounds like the boy, a lot of times he seeks out negative behaviors, especially from his siblings, negative attention from his siblings. We do know that his parents spank, and, we've talked about positive discipline, but, we don't think that, he's being abused, it sounds like. And I said, it doesn't sound like it to me. I'm like, we can engage in some more, positive discipline education as a whole in our workshops, and we can pass on some information to this family, and maybe help them be a little bit more positive, and less physical in their discipline. But it sounds like it was, one spank on the bottom. And they're like, yeah, we don't think it's child abuse. And I said, I don't think it's child abuse either. Let's just keep an eye on it. Let's document any more concerns that we have. And I'll go ahead and kind of plan on doing some positive discipline in my next workshop. And we all kind of agreed. Then another time was a couple years later. It was at a school age program. Well, it was a full child care center, but we had a school age component. And the kids came back from school, and the caregiver said, hey, it's like 90 degrees. So-and-so will not take off his fleece jacket, and it's zipped all the way up on his neck, so we can't see anything. And I'm just really concerned. And I said, absolutely. And I said, I'm just going to take so-and-so and he's going to go play in my office. So I took him up to my office and I let him color, and I printed out some cool coloring pages for him and got him some markers and all this kind of stuff. And after a while I said, so-and-so, I just need to look at your neck and, your shoulders real fast. And then we're going to zip it back up and you can keep playing. And he let me do it. And within a second or two, I saw some belt mark bruises on his neck and his shoulders, and I said, what happened? And he kind of let me know real fast what a parent had done to him. And I said, okay, I'm just gonna have you play here, and we're gonna get you some help, okay? and I just let him continue to play. And it was one of the harder cases that I ever had to report. Not the reporting itself, but the fact that I was the second person to report that day. CPS came out within 2 hours because they were actually on their way to the elementary school, where the elementary school teacher, as a mandated reporter, had already reported. So they swung by my childcare center, and because this was a fairly substantiated claim just from looking at him, to the fact that within the central index there had already been some complaints, some mandated reporters had already put in at previous times about possible abuse. They actually went ahead and they took him that night to Polinsky Center, and then the next day he went to the Chadwick Center, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. And we actually never saw him again. I heard through the community that a grandma had tried to fly out and possibly take him as a foster child, but it was really hard that we didn't have a lot of closure to it. So that's an example of 2 staff members reporting to me as their director, us agreeing that it was child abuse, and then making our report to CPS, and then for one of them, Child Welfare Services getting involved, and for the other one, seeing that it probably wasn't child abuse, but maybe we needed to do some more parent education. And then I've only had it happen once, but there was a neglect case, or my teacher thought it was a neglect case. I thought that we could better serve the family through more targeted interventions as far as parenting. She disagreed with me, and she went ahead and reported on her own. I supported her. I knew that she was going to do it. I told her why I didn't want to report, and she told me she really felt she needed to, and I supported her in that way, because it is really important that we empower our staff, that they can report on their own. So even if we don't agree, they are a teacher, it's their gut feeling, and they need to report on their own. It wasn't substantiated, and they didn't work with the family after that, but I said that doesn't matter. You doing what you thought was right in that moment is the most important thing. And then I'm going to say it over and over and over again, but all teachers need to have mandated reporter or child care professional training within 90 days of employment, and then every 2 years after. Right now, if you have anybody working in your center, you're going to need to do this by March 30th, 2018. But in addition to this new mandated reporter online training, I think that employees should be informed and participate in regular and then ongoing training. So only training every 2 years, I don't think is quite adequate. I think that the online training is fantastic and it touches on a lot of things, but going every 2 years, so over 600 days without training might have teachers forget the importance of this. So I think regularly in staff meetings or in trainings that they come out of the classroom to, talking about child abuse types, state laws, the teacher's reporting process, then identifying resources and relevant services, talking about, the overlying and underlying issues of child abuse as well, mental health services, domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, and then unfortunately children with special needs who are at a greater incidence of having physical abuse performed on them. Also, if your program has volunteers that work with children, they are not mandated reporters, but I typically trained them alongside teachers as well. They had a little bit of a different training in that, they just needed to kick it up to me at all times. They could, as a member of the community, always report on their own, but if they would just come and write down what happened, then I would look into it, because they didn't need to be legal mandated reporters in this case. And then I also like to throw it out, since we're near Miramar and Camp Pendleton, that military installations, so the Marine Corps and the Navy, have their own policies. And this involves PMO, which is our military police, and the military chain of command, in addition to CPS. So CPS, you report the same way to Child Protective Services, but then from there, the military police and then whatever chain of command there is gets involved as well. So the military police will come out and they will do their own report, and then the Marine or the sailors CO, so their commanding officer, will get the report as well, and it will also be kind of handled in-house as far as the Marine Corps. So CPS is involved. So when I mean in-house, it doesn't mean that just the Marine Corps handles it, but the Marines handle it concurrently with Child Protective Services. Most of you have seen Shadows to Light, and then there's a 2016 Shadows to Light update, which is like 4 or 5 minutes, and it's more updated with law and regulations. It's definitely a classic. You've probably seen it, but I think it's a great resource because it comes from our attorney generals and it gives that basic information on child abuse and mandated reporter. It's very visual. It pulls at your heartstrings, and that's why I kind of like it, is because it talks about that gut instinct and how important it is when you have a suspicion that you report. So that's why I like this. It's 20 minutes. I always showed it when I had staff onboarding. So this is what we do. This is our mandated reporter training within California, and this is what we believe at this program. So now I'm getting into the child care professionals mandated reporter online. So this is this new thing that in 2018 all of the teachers need to do. So I'm going to go over what it actually looks like, and then I'm going to talk about some issues and considerations and ways that you can kind of train. So the mandated reporter online training, it consists of the home section. So you go to this website and you click that you're ready to take the training, and it starts to introduce you to child abuse. In lesson 1, though, it's an overview, and then they talk about cultural sensitivity and parental risk factors. So as you go through the lessons, you just click. There might be links to take a multiple choice question. I'll go through real life like vignettes, so you would have examples of what it looks like. And the multiple choice inside the actual training is really nice because it tells you if you're right or you're wrong. So you can click, yes, I think this is child abuse, and it will tell you yes or no why it's child abuse or why it's not child abuse. So I really like that part of it. So you are clicking through this on your own, so it's somewhat self-paced, but it's mostly reading. So lesson 1 is overview, cultural sensitivities, and then parental risk factors. I think it's really nice. It gives us kind of background on parents and how child abuse happens. Lesson 2 is protections for us, and then failure to report, and then confidentiality, that CPS isn't going to tell the parents our names. They know, most likely, you know, if they didn't go anywhere except preschool and the child had a bruise and then you call, they most likely know that it came from the teacher in our program, but that's fine. We stand by what we did. Lesson 3 is legal and ethical issues, and then discussing abuse with children. So in the previous slides, I kind of talked about a child that two children that I had conversations with or saw bruises on their body, and I tried not to ask leading questions or put anything in their mind. I just tried to get a sense of what happened in the home so that I could say, okay, I suspect child abuse and I report, or I don't suspect child abuse, I'm not going to report. So that's a really great section, as well as discussing abuse with children and not asking leading questions or putting thoughts into their mind. Then 4 is the suspected child abuse, working with child welfare services, CWS, working with the police, and then the central index. And I think this is great for teachers, as a lot of them don't even know about the central index or what child welfare services does. And then I'll actually be our reading for this week is I have a reading for you guys called How the Child Welfare System Works, if you don't know, or I think this is a great resource for teachers. So after you report, typically the question that you get asked the next day is what happened to the child, or what is going to happen to the child. A lot of times we don't know. Sometimes they stay in our program and we get to see them working through the steps of working with child protective services, things like that. But a lot of times they leave or you don't see the child again. And so letting your teachers read this kind of resource and kind of walking them through, you know, what child welfare services can do and what they won't do can kind of help them have some closure when it comes to child abuse. Then lesson 5 is working with licensing, which I think is great, and then red flags. And then I really like the supervisor's role. So you as a supervisor now are wanting to become a supervisor. What is your role within child abuse and being a mandated reporter? And they also talk about safe sleep within child care programs, which I think is great as well. Then there's kind of an optional area. It's about developmental delays and things like that. And I took it. I thought it was excellent. I think it really went into depth about why our vulnerable children with special needs are sometimes more at risk for child abuse. But there are some optional sections. Maybe you don't want to have your teachers do it. Maybe you do. That's your program's own decision. I think as a director, though, you should add to your body of knowledge by taking this optional section. They talk about domestic violence, substance abuse, homeless children, and then I really like the section on strengthening families as well. And then at the very end, you take a quiz, and it's 20 questions, and if you get it right and you pass, then the certificate will be emailed to you. Then the teacher or you need to print it out if you pass and put it in your file at work. And it's nice that it's email as well, because now I have this in my email as well for the next 2 years until I need to take it again. So more about this reporter training online. So I took it about 2 weeks ago. I got up at 5 and I was done by 6:30. And what I really liked about it is there's the multiple choice questions that you can click through. So if you get it wrong, it tells you why. And if you get it right, it tells you why as well. So I think that's a way to test your knowledge as you go through so that hopefully you'll pass the quiz at the end. And then I like the vignettes as well. You know, they give you kind of a real life example and then you kind of determine about abuse and things like that. It's very easy to read and it's very easy to understand as well. And then I really, really liked the focus on the parents and cultures and disabilities and kind of alternative issues that could be happening within the family that could lead to some vulnerable populations being at risk for abuse. So I think that's a fantastic thing that they did as far as this online reporter training. And the next slide, I'm going to talk about some other issues that I had as well. So some issues with the mandatory training is, as far as I could tell, and please correct me, is when I was looking, I only saw it in English. If you see it in Spanish or any other languages, please let me know so that I can link it for the rest of the students. But as far as I know right now, it's in English. It's very reading heavy. So it's primarily you clicking through paragraphs that you read about child abuse and then possibly answering some questions and reading about real life examples. There's no pictures and there's no videos. And I know as teachers of young children, we know that everyone learns in different ways. So if you are, you know, somebody who learns by reading, then this training is great for you. But if you need to be spatial or kinesthetic or something like that, it's kind of left you out. So that might be why programs might also want to play the Shadows to Light video and then maybe supplement it with trainings or multimedia sources to help various learners kind of absorb this information. And then there's some time issues. First of all, you need to train all of your staff by March 30th, 2018, and the training is slated to take 3 hours. It took me an hour and a half from beginning to end, so from starting it to taking the quiz. I'm a very fast reader though, and it's information that I kind of already knew already. So I did skim parts of it, but I did read through it. So you might need, I would anticipate that for staff members, it would take between 2 hours and 4 hours. So some people are going to go a little bit faster clicking through it, and some are going to take much, much longer depending on their, how comfortable they are with reading that much. So if you have a small program with 2 or 3 people, then, you know, just knowing that you need, 6 to 8 hours for this. But I have worked at programs before where we have 40 to 80 staff members on a location. So those programs needed to have started like yesterday with this training in order to get everybody done by March 30th, 2018. So just know that it's going to take around 3 hours. And how are you going to provide this training for all of them by March 30th? Are they going to take it home and you'll compensate them for their time? Are you going to pull them out of the classroom? And unfortunately, it's something that they have to do fairly individually. So they need to walk through it themselves, read it, and then they need to take the quiz themselves so they can put their own email address in and then print it on their own. So while maybe you could walk through it as an entire group, they would still need to go back again and take the quiz with their own email. So that's one of the issues with it as well. So once we implement it, every teacher must complete the quiz, and it's about 3 hours, and then they need to have it emailed to them, and then they need to print it out to keep on file. As a director, you most likely want to keep the dates that the employee completed it because they're going to need it in 2 years. So knowing that all of your staff took it in January, February, and March of 2018, in 2020, you're going to need to do this all over again. So knowing when everybody took it so you can have them trained again within 2 years. I would add to their learning with the Shadows and Light video. You could lecture in a staff meeting. And then at another center, we had somebody come from Chadwick, and they presented at a staff meeting about social services and kind of the process with child welfare services after reporting. So typically, if a child is removed right away, they'll go to what's called the Polinsky Center, which is kind of a home-like environment that children spend the night at. If they cannot be placed in a foster care home. And then the Chadwick Center is where a lot of the assessments and treatments then happen. And then there's some really great YouTube videos out there as well where EMTs kind of talk about it, teachers talk about it. So that might also be something that you could use in addition to Shadows Light or instead of Shadows to Light in order to kind of hit our visual learners or people who learn not by reading. So child abuse and reporting and then the identification is one of our key duties. So I think it's one of the most important things that as a director I engage in, and then as somebody who works with children. It's really our moral duty that we protect children by anytime we have a suspicion, we report it to the relevant social services, Child Protective Service and then Child Welfare Services, so that they can help the child get out of possibly a dangerous home for them. So I am recording this the Sunday before it goes live, which is on November 20th. This is going to go live. This is actually a week without instructions. So you do not need to work on this module this week if you don't want to. I know a lot of you do work and you'll have Thursday and Friday off and you'd like to get a head start, and that's why I've opened it a week early. So you have an entire 2 weeks to work on the course content and the assignments for this. But for the next 2 weeks, you need to read how the child welfare system works. And this is for your own information about CWS. And then also for any staff members that might have concerns about child abuse and what happens after you report. Then we'll be discussing working with licensing. And then our last assignment for this entire class is our director's file. We will have a final exam at the end of the class, but this is our last assignment that you'll be working on, and it's due 12/10. So you're going to have a couple weeks in order to figure out the director's file and how you are going to get it to me. You've written most of this already, so if you've turned in all your assignments, then great. You have most of it already done. You just need to organize it for me, and you need to add the resources that hopefully you've been keeping track of all semester. If you have missed a couple assignments, then you're going to want to go back and you're going to want to make sure that you add to it, write it, and then add it to your director's file so that you have a discipline policy, you have schedules, you have routine, you have food policy, health and safety policy, all of this type of stuff. Because my goal is that you're leaving this class and you have this fantastic director's file of policy already written. Maybe you're already working as a director and this will add to it, or maybe you eventually want to open your own in-home daycare, your own childcare center, and having a mission statement and a diversity statement and all of this type of stuff is really going to help you when you go to open your own program. Then I'm also opening an extra credit assignment, and this is about technology. So not how I teach specifically, like not my course content, because that was in an anonymous survey that went out earlier. This is actual extra credit about technology. So how does Canvas work? What platforms do you like? Did it crash all the time? Is it too buggy? What other apps have you seen in other programs that you think would add to this? So it's how Canvas kind of works, how you like it, and how we can make it a better learning system for you. And then an additional resource for your director's file is a 150-page regulation handbook. It's really, really dense. Don't print it out unless you really want it. But having it on your desktop if you're working with children is really going to help you so that you can always look back to what the actual regulation is. Like, what does licensing actually say in this situation about, marketing or sanitizing tables, something like that. So that's what you guys are kind of working on for the next 2 weeks.